You're good. You have your presentation slide. Is there anything I can do? No, well, I'm just there. Are we ready? Yep. Okay. Please.
Yes, I started break anyways. I have to first break time submitted.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
My name is Clavero.
And welcome to this for EDI, a Research and Practice Showcase. Actually, it is the fourth one. We started in January 2020, but it is our only second one in person. Because we had actually our very first one, it was right before lockdown. So the two following years, we had it online. So we were wondering how many people would come here today. You know, like also we're ordering the catering, so it's great to see. I mean, such a great turnout. So today we have 7 presentations, and the way we are going to do it, we are going to have a block of 3 presentations, then we will have a break, and then we will have another second block of 4 presentations. After each block, we will have some time for questions and answers. And I think it's the best way to do it, just to stick to the time. So if you have a question or a comment in any of the papers being presented, it is better if you just wait to that, you know, to the questions and answers time. Now, we are due to finish today at 12:50, if I'm not wrong. But, well, we can finish also at 1, you know, because these things usually they run over time a little bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce very briefly each of the presenters, okay? So our first presenter is actually online. Elaine, are you there? I don't know if Elaine is there. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm here.
I read better.
With an echo, it sounds like.
Is there Elaine?
Hold on. Yeah.
Here she is.
Hello, Elaine. Can you hear me, Elaine?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Elaine.
No?
Oh, that's odd.
I can hear her quite faintly. The volume.
Yeah.
Is it the volume here, yeah? Okay.
Do you want to try again, Elaine?
Can you hear me now?
It's on the max.
The speaker is on the max?
Yeah.
They're saying that they can hear me online.
Could someone else on the call try speaking and we can see if it's...
Apparently everyone else can hear her, so I'm pretty sure it's our sound settings.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Speaker.
Maybe you can do
Like device settings. So I'm in audio settings, audio devices. There's only one. And speakerphone? No, that's wrong.
Will I get an IT guy?
If you wouldn't mind, yeah.
Okay, what we are going to do, Elaine, can you hear me?
Yeah, they can hear.
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me. We cannot hear you, Elaine. We are going to get somebody to fix this problem, but I think one thing that we can do, can we move your presentation like for half an hour or so until this is fixed? Are you available?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So we
You're in the hot
move
seat,
the
Keith.
presentations until this is, because we cannot hear you. Okay, there is a problem here in the room, that we cannot hear you. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Elaine.
I don't know why.
So we go to
Keith.
that is Keith. Yes, Keith Murphy is going to give a presentation on neurodiversity, dyslexia, higher education, difference and inclusion. And Keith, I'm going to introduce yourself. Yeah. So Dr. Keith Murphy is a lecturer in applied social care at TU Dublin, Tala. He completed his PhD in anthropology in Maynooth University in 2021. And his research explores students with dyslexia, neurodiversity, and how they navigate third-level education. He's a dyslexic thinker, friend and supporter of the dyslexia. I have a problem with pronouncing dyslexia. As you probably have noticed already. He's a supporter, a friend and supporter of the Dyslexia Association of Ireland and the European Dyslexia Association, and he advocates for students with neurodiverse differences. So Keith.
Sorry. Hi. Good morning. So, yeah, I'm just.
Maybe I will.
That sounded like volume now. So, I was just going to give an overview of my PhD research and some of the findings, and 15 minutes. I'll try and fit everything in. So, you have to bear with me. I will have to read, as I have dyslexia myself. So, one of the main things, people think dyslexia is just about reading and writing, but it's actually really difficult to articulate information as well when you have it too. So I suppose just that's me, yeah, PhD in Maynooth. I only completed it in 2021. I only started it in 2017. I only discovered I had dyslexia in late 2016, even though I'd done my degree. So I only went back to college. Well, I never went to college, but I only went to college in 2010 after an accident. And then I did the degree, HDIP, master's, and then the PhD. So I went right through without knowing, but the struggles made sense. But that was the motivation to do the research. I was doing something different on adult education. And then when I seen I had dyslexia, because if you think of all, we go through the characteristics of having dyslexia and the characteristics of being a good academic are kind of binary opposites. So I wanted to see how other students managed to study in third level with dyslexia and succeed, which all of them did. So it's experience like through the prism of difference. The prism being the picture below, because having a neurodiverse difference and being in third level education, that's an experience that's very individual. It's experienced in many ways and it's influenced by many internal and external factors. Therefore, the metaphor of the prism is a perfect way to imagine the complexity of the experiences. Looking at it through the lens of difference as opposed to disability, and I mean, it's a disability, yes, for sure, 100%, and we need the labels or tags so as we can get support, etc. But looking at it through a difference enables the students to look at themselves differently, identify with this differently, and achieve differently than looking at it through disability, because that ties neurodiversity more so into a model of vulnerability, deficit, lack, and underachieving, whereby when you accept it as a difference, you're kind of accepting it as an integral part of the self and viewing it differently as opposed to just being deficit. I write with a lot of analogies, so I'd use a lot of analogies, kind of like a storytelling idea. And people seem to, well, dyslexic thinkers definitely relate better to that. I also used images. So I kind of got all of the findings together, put them in participants, gave bullet points, and my daughter studying animation and illustration, so she drew images of what that meant, and I put it in as well. I was trying to do not a standard PhD of just 80,000 words, because what dyslexic person is going to read that, but anyway, I had to fulfill the criteria, so that was my only way that I could get my ideas in. So, just a quick overview of what they are and what they're not. Neurodiversity was first coined by Judy Singer in 1990. It's an umbrella term for a range of different neurological challenges, and they can be referred to as specific learning difficulties, development disorders. It can be things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, and many other things. But the word dyslexia is far from a new phenomenon. That was first mentioned in 1878 by Kussmaul, and it was defined as word blindness. But in 1887, Rudolf Berlin first mentioned dyslexia, and the first research was done on that. Neurodiversity advocates for the idea that everyone thinks differently and experiences and lives in the world in their own way. This means that there's no one right way of thinking, and behaving and having a brain difference is not a deficit. It's just a difference. We embrace the idea of diversity within nature and other communities, and neurodiverse people just want the same. So we've all heard, and the research was mainly based on dyslexia, but obviously neurodiversity plays a big role in that. So we all heard the word dyslexia, and we all have our own ideas of what it is and how it can affect someone. These are often built through personal experiences where we know people or family members, or we've met people in school or work. But a lot of our perceptions are culturally developed within our environments. And these are often misconceptions built around dyslexia. So there are often misconceptions are built around dyslexia, and raising awareness will help to dispel some of these myths. And some of these myths are it's related to intelligence, it's laziness. You can catch it, and big argument going around at the moment was, does it actually exist? Okay, so it affects 1 in 10, it's specific learning difficulty, and this then labels a person with dyslexia as being disabled and vulnerable. It can cause difficulties with learning and in the workplace. It does not affect everyone who has it in the same way, and it occurs on a spectrum from mild to dose. Research has proven that the earlier it's diagnosed and interventions are put in place, the easier people can manage and achieve in life. And that was a big thing in the findings, that a lot of the students were diagnosed in primary and secondary school and learned interventions very early, and that really helped. Whereas some of us were diagnosed as adults, and we'd already had the strategies which were making us struggle, and we really hadn't built any, developed any strategies ourselves. So you can't see it, you can't cure it, and you can't catch it. Instead, it occurs on a spectrum with a variety of impacts, right? So there's common difficulties associated with dyslexia, such as reading. Now, it doesn't mean you can't read. It just means you might read different in terms of fluency, comprehension, and understanding what you're reading, and trying to, develop your ideas around it. So when you read, trying to articulate it. Concentration is massively important in the reading. That's why one of the findings was around Verdana, the font style. So by changing this from Times New Roman, it allows the student or the reader to stay more engaged in what they're reading, where certain fonts make them lose their place and they just lose interest in it. So it's not that you can't read, you just read differently. Spelling, writing, articulating information, and other related cognitive processing abilities. And these are often or always exposed within an educational setting or a workplace environment, particularly when one is put under pressure, as you're witnessing firsthand, to perform in front of people, right? As I say, it affects 1 in 10 people, and if a parent has it, a sibling has a 40 to 60% chance of also having it. And if someone has dyslexia, they have a 50% chance of having something else. It's very unusually for it to be a standalone difference. You usually have something else. I tested this on myself in terms of, you know, do I just have dyslexia or whatever, and I did online test for autism and ADHD, and I scored very highly. So it does seem that when you have one, you have the other. And also if you have another neurodiverse difference, you can have dyslexia as well. So it's very often viewed through an ableist lens, which is discrimination of and social prejudice against people with disabilities based on the belief that the typical abilities are superior. Some of the common myths associated, as I said, are about the brain of a person with dyslexia and if they're less intelligent. However, it's not related to intelligence at all, okay? A person with dyslexia just has a different brain processing system, whereby we just approach tasks differently. It might take longer, it might look different or weird to you, but it doesn't make it any less. I always use the example when I go to IKEA and I buy this box and I bring it home. I open the box, put all the pieces together, get the instructions, put them in the recycling bin, and then I just look at the picture and make it. And I never have any bits left over. And the Billy Boy shelf is still standing with my books in it since 2010, so it works. But it just looks different. And my wife often goes, my God, I've never seen that as awkward as you with a screwdriver, but the job still gets done, you know. So it's just, as I say, is it looks different, takes longer, mightn't be how the standard way of doing it, but it still gets done. And with studying with a diverse difference, neurodiverse difference is exactly the same. But identifying with it can carry cultural and societal expectations and perceptions. And then this can often identify you as having the deficit in your brain functioning and can label you as a less intelligent person. And again, these are all the findings from the research I'm trying to give an overview of. They're not my personal thoughts, although they would be experiences I've had. So in higher education, it's manifested by the difficulty in reading, spelling, and articulating information, both verbally and written. Short-term memory retention is a big one. Note-taking, comprehension, and memory recalling of specific subject-related language. Excuse me. I have a negative antigen. It's just a cold with asthma. The academic language from lectures and tutorials. I studied anthropology, so the language in anthropology is like unbelievable. As someone said to me, what are you doing a degree in when you can't even pronounce the words you're doing it in? But 11 years later, I can pronounce it now, you know. So and these are all despite conventional instruction, adequate intelligence, and social cultural opportunity. And if you look at all of the things that the challenges are for someone with a neurodiverse difference, they're all the things you're supposed to possess to be that good academic, so to speak. Sorry, and it exists as a discrete entity and occurs along a continuum and varies in severity. So I just have some of what the participants said and some ideas of what they came up with, some of the things they said while we were relating around this, you know, look at the gift and the course, but I've learned to live with it, because there's a huge thing out there where people will say, oh, look at Richard Branson, he's got dyslexia, sure, you can be anything, or, you know, Picasso or whatever else, you know, we hear all about the movie stars or anything else. Oh, thanks. And it puts an awful lot of pressure on people that, oh yeah, you have dyslexia, but you're gifted. You should be artistic or whatever else. I'm still waiting to wake up and jump out of bed and bang out with Picasso. So far hasn't happened. I think we have to confront the horrible things like the gift of dyslexia. The big gift is what annoys me. One said, I just always thought like I was a class clown and stuff because that's what the teachers told me. Perceptions of dyslexia is so different, etc. You can read them yourselves. And it does present in many ways, but it's really heightened in different circumstances. In the workplace and education, particularly when presenting information, public speaking, in meetings, or having to articulate our knowledge in front of peers. Okay, and even speaking at a meeting, even if it's a union meeting or a staff meeting or a team meeting for people with neurodiverse differences can be really difficult. So the next time we receive an essay exam or even an email with a misspelled word or slightly confusing sentence, or we witness someone trying to articulate information to us which may not seem typical, be a little bit patient. Try to avoid comments which may cause harm. Don't judge or do not let any preconceived cultural or other prejudice or notions creep in. And again, not saying anybody does that, but what I'm just saying is we've all heard of unconscious bias. We've all heard of these things. We've all, I'm guilty myself even, of just doing it. So a slight check to just think, perhaps it's not because of A, B, or C, and it could be just neurodiversity. It's not because they're lazy, they're not less intelligent, they're just processing different. I mean, I always say people admire everywhere and honour and encourage diversity in animals, nature, and our biosphere. Therefore, all cultural diversities and differences, such as dyslexia and neurodiversity, should receive the same recognition. So again, some of the big findings were institutional and attitudinal barriers. Okay, it was amazing what the participants come up with around the barriers of institutions and people's attitudes. Disclosure is massive. Having to disclose a neurodiverse difference in higher education is a daunting experience. The discourse around neurodiversity or dyslexia in particular, the effects on the self are really big. The effects on the person and their self-identity, self-identity, group identity, negative identity, the learning environments, and one which I'm working on now, and hopefully the article will be out soon. It's with the editor. Is on, a thing called voice suppression. So, you know, we all have this idea where we have to be inclusive. We need to encourage everyone in the classroom to talk. We should have everybody speak, and it'll help them. It's the best thing for them. Everybody talks. But actually, when someone with a neurodiverse difference and all them characteristics I just explained to you, we could be sitting here, I'm talking, and I might say, I don't know, okay, Keith, what do you think of that? Tell us all what you think. Keith freezes, can't think, is neurodiverse, all the characteristics come into play. So he can't think. So the theorist called Michael Carruthers, and he has a theory called vicissitude, which is an ordeal, which is something that happens out of place, and you then go into yourself, you panic, you fret, you go into yourself. It's then called voice suppression, which is an ordeal of language. Theorist is Basso. And then I'm terming this that people develop a form of academic imprisonment. They're in classes, tutorial rooms, and they're afraid to talk, they're afraid to speak because of the fear of looking like a fool in front of their peers, in front of the lecturers. And within the 300-page thesis, if anyone ever wants to look at it, is stories about this. So I never did Leaving Cert. I left before my intercert at the time it was. And I went back, I left in January, I went back in June to do the exam because I felt I might need it going forward. So even at 15, I had a bit of an idea education had value. But my French teacher, so I'm from Clondalkin, so probably notice I have a Dublin accent. So, you know, when you read French, it's brilliant. I love hearing people read French because they sing it, but with a Dublin accent, it's very difficult to do that. So when undiagnosed dyslexia, it was even worse. So she used to make me read every day, and then everyone would laugh, and she'd laugh. So I didn't care about my mates, but when I seen her laughing, anyway, I went mad, and my French was over in second year. But I'm just saying, every student experienced this idea of being made to talk in front of the class, and how that enacted this vicissitude, which led to the voice suppression. And that terms, as I say, was academic imprisonment. Sorry, I know I'm harping on now. So then some of the things I suppose we can do, raising awareness is the absolute key, I think. Because, like, I mean, it sounds like I'm being negative and giving out on teachers and lecturers and all, but I'm not. I'm just telling you what they told me. Over 2 years, I sat in the rooms with them. I did lectures, tutorials, group work. I sat with them in cafes. I spoke to them after ordeals had happened, and we discussed it. So this is what they're telling me. But raising awareness is the absolute key, that we all become aware of it, right? Now, any training we ever get, formally or informally, in teaching in academia, anywhere, there's no training for us. I did a teaching degree. I think we did a 2-hour talk on it. And again, it's just because it's new now and people don't understand it. So I think the implementation of a statewide awareness and education campaign around dyslexia and neurodiversity and inclusiveness is recommended, right? University staff and academic staff need to be given continuous professional development on dyslexia and neurodiversity, what they are, what they're not, how it presents, how it affects the student's educational experience, and what can be done to develop a more inclusive learning space. Some of the participants even reported in secondary school where the career guidance were saying, oh, sure, look, you could never be a nurse. You have dyslexia, sure. You can't spell, you couldn't write out the medicines and all. There's a real thing, actually. There's a whole field of debate and theory and stuff going on around dyslexic people being nurses because of the spelling and the reading and everything else. So it's that unconscious thing that we developed that we're not even aware, and I always have to check myself as well. So in my research, the knowledge lecturer had of dyslexia was from personal experience, either through a family member or encountering in the classroom and having some experience. Otherwise, they knew nothing about it. So how can they work with it when they don't know nothing about it? So there's no blame being attached, is what I'm trying to say, you know. There's no evidence of any form of training, right? So one way to support neurodiverse students would be to cease educating through a rote and memorizing system and reward creativity and innovative training, right? So a few of the things, teaching methods, releasing information early. Just hanging on to the slides until Monday at 10 o'clock when the lecture's at 11. If you release it early, not only neurodiverse students, but all students can access the information, see the language, see what's coming up, understand it. So before you come into your classroom, you see, all, like I said to you today, vicissitude. What the hell is that? So instead of me explaining that, you have a go at it beforehand. You see it. You might want to Google it. Like when I Google, I learn what a word is differently than most people. But when I sit in the classroom, I know what it is. So it's not the first time I've encountered it. I don't have a fear of it. And I'm not in my head then trying to go off and decide what that word is. And I'm completely missing out on the lecture. So, you know, I know there's a fear of, you know, academic stuff being taken and blah, blah, blah. But look, everything is out there in the world now. There's nothing at all that you have. Once you publish, print a master's and submit it or a thesis or anything else, it's up there for everybody. Sorry, and then assessments. Trying to do different assessments and exams and that, but we're all in that field. And font styles is one of my big ones. But again, time. Discourse, really important, how we talk about neurodiversity, how we talk about neurodiverse people, inclusion, etc. And I'm sure this is across the board. Disclosure, creating safe places for people to disclose is vitally important. And creating safe spaces in our learning and teaching environments is hugely important also. Creating a space where a student feels safe and comfortable to speak and answer your question without fear of what we spoke about. Stigma, huge. An association, you know. The association of an achievement with a disability is head melting. Oh, look at me, I've neurodiversity and a PhD. Wow, you know. People associate, you're great, go back to the gift, you know. And accommodations, access to technology, massively important. So I know I'm probably gone over time on it. So I'll finish up. I suppose just a couple of things for the students or for the neurodiverse person. Acceptance is the key to success. When every student, we worked on a model where we studied as opposed to the model we had. We developed kind of a neurodiverse model where we incorporated all different things and we accepted it as part of us. So the minute you accept that as being an integral part of you, which I had to do myself, you know, barriers drop, you drop, and you achieve success. And every one of the participants were the same. Because it eliminates the negative feelings and expectations and the impacts on the self especially, and the fear of other people knowing. Who knows, what are they going to think? Are my friends going to change their opinion, etc. Raising awareness is the key. I said that to society accepting neurodiversity as a difference, not just a deficit. Changing our discourse is key to dispelling the myths and cultural preconceptions around neurodiversity and intelligence and ability. And again, I'm not trying to, you know, lecture anybody or say about anybody. I know I'm speaking to the converted. I know the people in the room are all working in this field and we're all making the change. I was only saying last night to my wife, like, I actually love coming in here because the EDI, you know, you get this, I don't know, this great sense of belonging and we're all here trying to make the change, like, you know, we're all the change makers, changing the rules of the game. So we have to keep playing the game. That's what I'm going to say to you. But again, I'll finish up. As I found, these things are often carried out unconsciously. We don't even realize we're doing them, okay? So we all, even myself, need to check ourselves at times. And this helps to eliminate these barriers in our teaching and learning environments. And then this will have a much more positive effect on those within them. So thanks a million. Thanks a million.
We always learn a lot from your experiences, so thank you for sharing them.
No, thank you.
Please, when that article is out, let
Yeah,
us
we'll
know.
send it. Oh,
It's
absolutely.
very interesting about the academic imprisonment and voice suppression.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
I know,
So,
yeah, it is. It's good. So, yeah. Thanks a million. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll try and scrap it right. EDI. And the chair is Michael.
Sorry, I left this here, so.
No, I got that right.
That's okay.
It's hard.
Can I escape that for a second?
Yeah, you can still share the screen if you need to.
Okay, yeah, that'd be handy just for a moment.
There you go. If I go, I'll bring the book.
So I definitely never got I put it over your eyes, sorry.
So who's online now? Who needs to speak?
Elaine, Elaine, can you try your mic again, see if we can hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Fantastic.
Perfect.
Teams itself, it was set to speak as front there rather than the X front. Kind of a weird. Teams is
okay.
other options. You know, in the sound settings, you've only got the one input and the one out, or now you have others. But
Yeah.
anyway, look, you're working out.
So good
Is that
morning,
right?
Elaine.
Fantastic,
We
thank
are
you.
delighted. Now we can hear you. Okay, so
I'm glad to know that you can hear me.
great. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Elaine Chapman. She's going to present a paper entitled Mind the Gap, Education as a Barrier to Inclusion. And Elaine is a library assistant at TU Dublin. She is disabled and neurodivergent, and her interests are in intersectionality, accessibility, student support, and making education more accessible. Elaine is working on Rebuilding the Ability Network in TU Dublin. This is a network for disabled staff and volunteers also as membership development officer for Disability Power Ireland, which is a new disabled persons organization in this country. So Elaine, whenever you are ready.
Sure. Let's hope this does the job. And actually, while I'm here, sorry. And we should hopefully have subtitles as well when it's on. So the truth is that I am here talking to you today largely through pure luck. It's very much a happy accident that I did wind up in TU Dublin. I see the changes that staff and students are trying to make here, and I want to be part of it. That might seem odd as an opening statement, but there is a good reason behind it. I grew up without the majority of my disability diagnosis. Somehow I made it through college and school without the ability to study at all. I knew, like most students, that I needed to study, but I think it's kind of quite ironic that, you know, someone who can't study wound up working in an academic library. It was only after I graduated college that I got the diagnosis of autism, and I am likely missing one of ADHD. Due to illness, this talk isn't going to be quite what I had set out for it to be, but I hope it at least gets some of you thinking. I'll start with a quote from Carl Sagan, and that is you have to know the past to understand the present. It's a quote that I like to see applied more to the education system in this country. If we don't know the mistakes of the past and how we've excluded students in the past, and even in the present, we can't plan for the future. For us, it means that we now have a greater need to know the issues our students face in society so that we can work alongside them to make their educational experience a positive one. I work in student support in the library. Since I've started here, there has been nothing but change, and in a way that is a good thing, because it shows that what is happening here is true change. As well as becoming a university, we are changing to a more adaptive way of teaching and working. True change may be slow, but it is the only effective way forward. Change that is driven by one or two individuals will meet resistance and will likely fail if they leave. Change that is driven by multiple members of staff and students at all levels in the university, though, that is more likely to succeed. In my experience, the education system is one that has needed change for a long time. I essentially grew up without having one diagnosis, and that was dyspraxia. There was support given to me in school for that support, but the support largely consisted of a laptop and some extra time in exams. For me, there was no social support. There was no other physical support or for attention, or support for attention or sensory needs, and yet I had the need for all of those. I also went through college with these same needs unmet. Why? Because I hadn't been able to attain a relevant diagnosis to get those supports. As it turns out, once I graduated and could somewhat afford to pay for them, I got those diagnoses. But that experience has led me to believe that supports, and especially disability-related supports, should not rely on students having access to diagnostic tests. It seems shocking to say, but as things are in Ireland, a diagnosis is a privilege, and one that not a lot of people can access. A lot of people think that the HSE does great work around and for disability and disabled people, and to an extent it does. But it doesn't always provide access to diagnosis, even for common conditions for adults. An autism diagnosis, for example, is generally not provided on the public system. It can cost upwards of €800 from a private professional, and ADHD can cost closer to €1,000. For Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, another condition that is often comorbid in neurodivergent people, it's becoming more widely recognized, but there is only one doctor in the country taking on patients, and an initial visit with him costs €400. Many adults and children with conditions like these struggle to get any access to service and treatment in the public system at the moment. There are also chronic illnesses like mast cell activation syndrome, where the HSE does not provide any access to the diagnostic tests. They are not actually provided in Ireland at all. I think in the long run, we need more adaptive services as a university in order to move away from relying on diagnosis to provide support. Disability services, in particular, would require more funding because their range of potential users and services would vastly increase. So, turns out I've accidentally forgotten a couple of slides in here, so the slides are a bit ahead, as you might have guessed. This leads me to our holistic intelligence model and the National Access Plan. I'm taking the National Access Plan out actually as well. Sorry. The HEA have released a new series of recommendations for higher education institutions. These recommendations target disadvantaged and underserved communities and give HEIs goals to meet to increase the accessibility of higher education for people from these communities. Our holistic education model ties well into these recommendations because it is a model that looks at social issues and does not solely focus on academic achievement, but rather looks at each student as a whole. It considers their mental and physical well-being alongside the environment, economic issues they face, and more. Our library services, I have found, already embrace a similar model when dealing with our students. We are flexible when it comes to personal issues impacting loan returns. We are not charging fines. We have created spaces like the Wellbeing Corner in Angel Street, a hugely popular corner of beanbags and colouring books. And we offer materials on mental health and physical well-being, and we're embracing diverse needs. In fact, the Wellness Corner is so popular that students have actually asked, can we expand it? And can it become available in other places? This approach is something our future services should embrace and expand upon. So what role should education have in our professional lives? Looking at librarianship in particular, the degree has almost come to define the profession. But for us at least, it should be the opposite. The profession should define the degree. In a profession that is crying out for more diversity, we are now essentially requiring people to have a master's degree before taking on the position as a library assistant. This is despite the fact that the educational requirement to take on that role is supposed to be the Leaving Cert. I am not against the degree, but I am against the fact that it and many others currently stand as barriers to inclusion. And it's a barrier that is growing, especially with the cost of living and housing crisis. When we are a country in the middle of a housing crisis, it must be noted that housing and the cost of housing can impact on people's ability to work in universities too. Again, focusing on the library side of academia, it's not a highly paid profession. According to Glassdoor, the average library assistant in Ireland earns 28,000. The average rent in Dublin is now 2,260 a month, according to the Residential Tenancies Board. That works out at 27,120 a year. The properties they looked at were for single tenancy, 2-bedroom dwellings. The rising rate of rent is fast making this work unaffordable, and that's if you can even get a paying library job, as many have to spend months or years volunteering on top of having to fund the degree. Whether or not we know it, it is impacting each of us. It's increasing stress levels in staff, and as well as staff turnover, as people are moving to more affordable areas and higher paying jobs. Now you can imagine that this issue is also going to be affecting our students. Can a student successfully complete their degree if they're taking on extra jobs just to make ends meet? Can they even begin the degree if they can't afford a place that they can afford, if they can't find a place they can afford to live in? And that's without the student facing any other disadvantage. So I mentioned before that I wound up here through chance. Oh, it looks like I didn't remember to put the holistic education slide in, just in the wrong place. I mentioned before that I wound up here through chance. Part of that chance is now something that students can no longer access. When I first graduated college in 2011, it was in what was then a severe job shortage. I tried for months to get a job, but the moment you mentioned disability at an interview, the interview just took a nosedive. So left with not much options, I applied for a grant to do a master's course. It was the equivalent of the SUSI grant, but for postgraduates. Had it not been for that grant, I would not have been able to afford the €5,000 to do my master's, and I would not be here today. I got lucky. I also got lucky in getting access to college through the disability access route to education because of the one disability that I did have diagnosed. You should not have to get lucky to be able to get the education you need to get yourself a job. When looking at the biggest barriers to education these days, we really do have to focus on finance. For me, it's hard to believe that it has actually become harder for students to be able to fund their education than it was since I was a student. I think this issue leads well to discussing intersectionality. I'm sure many of you know what intersectionality is, but for those who don't, it's a concept created by Kimberlé Crenshaw that describes the way in which systems of inequality based on gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, class, and other forms of discrimination intersect to create unique dynamics and effects. Our education system, and I'd say especially third level education, was originally designed by and for straight, white, able-bodied, rich men. I'd argue that it still does, unintentionally, carry a lot of the values of those original designers. This brings to life one of my favorite quotes, a quote from the Addams Family, and that is, "What is normal for the spider is chaos for the fly." Only most of us don't realize that we are not the spider, we are the fly. Normal didn't, since COVID, there's been a pressure to return to normal, but in reality, normal didn't work. It was a dysfunctional model for a great many of us, for disabled students, single parents, working people. It didn't work. I once saw an architect named Magda Mustafa present to a full room of 200 people. She had those who could stand do so, and then she had those who had broken a leg sit down, followed by those who had struggled with the pram on stairs, then those who had had their arms cast, or people who had struggled to access a bathroom. By the time she'd called out every physical barrier a person could face in the environment, only 2 men were left standing. Those are who architects design for. They are also the same audience the education system has been designed for. The 198 are who we are potentially excluding. And I think this ties in well to our previous reputation of universities being ivory towers, where many diverse cohorts of people were not welcome. Moving from being an exclusive defensive fortress to an educational institution that is open to all that need it is a massive challenge, and one that I feel we are doing well in. It may be that as part of that change, we need to bring on board those who have traditionally fallen between the gaps in the education system. They are best placed to tell us where those gaps are and how to bridge them. Perhaps ironically, in order to better our education system, we need the help of those who might not have the highest academic record, because those are the ones who have been the most failed by it. For this reason, I'll finish with a quote from Kimberly Crenshaw, and that is, "If we aren't intersectional, some of us, the most vulnerable, are going to fall through the cracks." Thank you very much. I hope that was at least somewhat coherent.
So please stay there, okay, because there will be a block of questions after the next presentation. Thank you. Okay, let me get the program again.
Sylvia and Deirdre.
Yes. So the next presentation is going to be given by Sylvia Healy and Deirdre Bonner. It is entitled "Development of a New TU Dublin Program for People with Intellectual Disabilities." Just a brief introduction. Sylvia is a lecturer in microbiology at TU Dublin Tala campus since 2004. And she investigates the role of informal education in human health and is the principal investigator for a research project assessing the potential of probiotic candidates. Yes, you will have to explain that.
Nothing to do with this today.
And Deirdre is a lecturer in social care at TU Dublin's Blanchardstown since 2010. Her background is in social care and social work, and has worked in both disability and family support services. Whenever you are ready, Deirdre and Sylvia.
So I'm just going to share the screen. Yeah. Do you want a full screen? Yeah.
Great, thanks. Hi, so thanks everybody. And what myself and Sylvia are going to talk to you about today is work we've been doing to develop a new programme for people with intellectual disabilities across TU Dublin. So to introduce ourselves, we've already been introduced. I'm Deirdre Bonner, background in social work and social care, and I'm one of the lecturers in social care in Blanchardstown.
And I'm Sylvia Healy. Thanks for the introduction, Sarah. And as mentioned before, I'm a lecturer in microbiology in the TU Dublin Tala campus, but I've also recently started working in Trinity on the Trinity Centre for People with Intellectual Disability in their Arts, Science and Inclusive Applied Practice programme as well.
So we thought we might start by just giving you some figures. We won't bore you with these figures, but just to give you a little bit of context of where people with intellectual disabilities sit in Irish society. So the first figure there is almost 23,000. So that's the amount of adults who are receiving a service, some kind of a service. So people who have an intellectual disability and who are receiving some kind of a service. The census figure is much higher. So 66,611 people identified in the last census as having an intellectual disability. So you can see that big discrepancy there between people who say I have an intellectual disability compared to people who are receiving some kind of service. 79, very small figure, is the amount of people over 18 who in 2018, I think it was, were registered on some kind of a third level programme. Okay, so you can see that if there's 66,000 people with an intellectual disability, 79 of them in 2018 were on some kind of a third level programme. So that figure is really, really small. The next figure there, 33%, is the amount of kind of 16 to 24-year-olds of people who have an intellectual disability who are not in receipt of anything. So they're not involved in training, employment, education, they're not involved in anything. The figure for the general population, people without disabilities, is 10%. So you can see that people with intellectual disabilities, again, are really overrepresented there. The next figures there relate to employment. So just over 17% of adults with intellectual disabilities are in employment, and that compares to 72% of the general population. So again, we're seeing these big gaps. And the multiplied by 2 there that the ERSI tell us that people with an intellectual disability are twice as likely to be living in poverty and experiencing poverty than the general population.
Thanks. Just to give you a sense of the provision of third level programs in Ireland, specifically for people with intellectual disability. According to INHEF, which is the Inclusive National Higher Education Forum, which is based in Trinity here, there are currently just 7 higher education institutes in Ireland that are offering higher level education for people with intellectual disability. There was more. Some of them suffered as a result of COVID, but many of them have fallen to the wayside as a result of funding or lack of funding thereof. So the picture on the right-hand side, or to your right, is some of the institutions that are offering, currently offering programs for people with intellectual disability at higher level education. And there are 8 up on that slide there, but actually the DCU program, the Ability Together program, has recently, just in December 22, is no longer offering a program. So there's no DCU program being offered this year in 23. Some of the other ones, then the 2 in the bottom there, offered by UCC, it looks like 2 programs there, but there's actually just one program, one that follows on from the other. So currently just 7 programs that's been offered nationally in Ireland, including one, of course, in the TU Dublin Blanchardstown campus that you're just going to talk about now in a minute. So many of these programs were disrupted, as I mentioned, over COVID. Many of them fall by the wayside due to lack of funding. But the funding that people have had in place has varied. Some of them have been funded by Association with Disability Providers. Others, like the Trinity programme, have been funded through a mixture of philanthropy and the partnerships with businesses. But many of them may be, say, a 3-year contract, not necessarily something that's going to be sustainable into the future. So the real take-home message from this slide really is that there's currently no central funding for these programmes. We hope that's going to change very soon, and there's no access to SUSI grants either for the students. So funding is an issue for these types of programmes for their sustainability.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you just very briefly, if I can sum up in a minute or two, about our experience in Blanchardstown. So in Blanchardstown, we have a programme running there. It's called the Learning Together program, and it's been running since 2009, which means we've had over 35 graduates to date. It's a program that's linked, it's a partnership between ourselves and a disability service provider in Dublin 15 called Avista, which means that only individuals who are linked with Avista get to come onto our program. So Avista fund the program by providing their own support staff to support the students while they're doing the program with us, and they also pay hours for lecturers who are delivering programs to the students. It's a real mix that we have. So some of the classes that the students are taking, they take on their own as a group. The kind of things we're covering in those classes is around personal development. It's around looking at your own story, where you've come from, where you want to go, looking at employment, really thinking about the future, making goals and making plans for how am I going to get there. The other kind of half of the program, the students are supported to take modules that we're already offering within the university. So they do some creative studies modules with our social care students and also with our community and youth work students. They do some sports modules with our sports students. They do a module where they're working with our horticulture students, where they're planting and digging and doing all those kinds of things. So they're taking modules that are already being offered. They're very much in the group, fully participating in those modules in the tutorial groups. They're working to different learning outcomes. So the program is validated at level 3. So they're working to different learning outcomes. They're being assessed differently, but they're very much included and part of those modules.
Okay, and to talk to you a little bit about the proposed program in Tallaght. So in the last year and a half or so, I've been working on a program for the Tallaght campus. And again, this particular program was, the model was initially based quite largely on the Trinity program, run by the Trinity Centre for People with Intellectual Disability, with the Art, Science and Inclusive Applied Practice program. So their model was a level 5 program aligned with level 5 QQI, and it was a blend between, say, inclusive model and, say, a fully inclusive model, and then a model that's quite separate. So in other words, some of their modules are inclusive and other ones are not. It's also a 2-year certificate program, so students will be full-time students, would be full students with full student cards and so on, be able to access societies and clubs and so on, but be able to have full graduation and all that, and being part of the college community is a very important part of the program, and that is going to be built in or designed into the program. So, so 120 credits for a 2-year program. Initially, we thought we'd take on 5 students in the pilot, and if the program was successful, to build it up to 10 students per year. Again, it's a cross-disciplinary program because part of the program, or part of the aim, one of the main aims of the program, is to try and get students to find out what they like. What is it about them that they like? What do they want to do in the future? What sort of areas might they like to work in the future? And to have kind of built-in models and built-in modules that help them to develop that aspect of themselves and to find out where they want to work and kind of get prepared for work as well. So that's the cross-disciplinary nature of the program. I think is quite an important flavour, quite an important design in the program, so that students get a taste of lots of different types of subjects and work out where they want to go from there. Again, it's like some of the models out there, it's a part integrated program. So some of the modules will be inclusive, where students would sit in class with other students on other programs, and other ones then will be standalone, where it's more appropriate to have a separate model, either because of the available resources or because it's kind of geared especially towards their needs. So, well, other models out there though are different. So there's a model they used to run in Maynooth, for example, that was a fully inclusive model. So people would come in, they'd look at the offerings in the university, and they decide whether they want to do, say, a module of anthropology or something in geography and so on. But sadly, that particular model is no longer running. Whereas other models then are completely separate, and then other models are kind of a hybrid of the two. So that's what this particular program was aiming to be, was a hybrid model. Again, another important feature of the program is those built-in supports. So again, like the Trinity program, they have an occupational therapy support where students have one-to-one sessions with an occupational therapist. So this program similarly would hope to have either occupational therapy supports or social care supports for the students built into the program as well. A student-centred approach, so want to build in things like authentic assessment and choice of assessment as well for the students, so that they're not kind of given a one fits all or one for all type of assessment, and that because that doesn't fit everybody. So to kind of give them an option of the type of assessment that suits them and what builds on their strengths and what they can do. And of course, build in all important UDL principles, universal design for learning principles, into the program as well would be a very important feature of it as well. But that model is kind of changing as a result of some changes in the funding offerings. So David's going to talk about that.
So I suppose I was in Blanchardstown working away on our Learning Together programme. Sylvia was in Tallaght working away and doing a lot of work in preparing for a level 5 programme. And then kind of the context changed, or is changing. It kind of hasn't fully changed yet. So the National Access Plan, the current one, for the very first time in any kind of literature or policy around higher education, specifically mentions people with an intellectual disability. So it recognises that a very normal, very usual thing to happen to young people when they finish school is that they go to college, and it recognises that for people with intellectual disability this isn't happening. So it mentions people with intellectual disability for the first time, and so I suppose because it's mentioned there, it needs to be backed up by some kind of funding, some kind of commitment from government. So what government have announced is Path 4 funding, which is a big fund of 3 million per year for 3 years for colleges to run what they're calling pathfinding programs. So they want colleges to come to them and to say, we're ready to run a program here for people with intellectual disabilities. This is what our program is going to look like, and they will allocate. And it's going to be a competitive call, so there's no guarantee that every college that wants it is going to get this funding, but they will issue funding or provide funding. So it's the very first time that central reliable government funding is being allocated for people with intellectual disability to access third level education. So for those of us working in the sector, it's really exciting. We were expecting that competitive call to come before Christmas, and it hasn't come yet. So we're still waiting on it. We think it's imminent, but we're hoping that it will be, that it will come soon and that we'll be ready to roll from September, as was the original plan. So we're just waiting on that. So in the meantime, I suppose rather than us doing our own thing in Blanchardstown and Sylvia preparing a different programme in Tallaght, we've kind of come together to say, well, look, let's look at a TU Dublin wide programme that could be rolled out on any of our 3 campuses. So we've been doing a lot of work on kind of what should that programme look like, what should be in it. And we've identified a number of themes that I'll go through with you, but as well as those kind of core themes that would run no matter what campus it's running on, we also would be including kind of specialised or specific modules that really feed into the strengths on different campuses. So for example, in Blanchardstown, because we have horticulture there, we have horticulture lecturers, we would be including horticulture as part of it. In Tallaght, because they have science and because they have hospitality, they will be including those kinds of modules. We think that it will be a stepped programme, so we think that people will come into first year at level 3. Many of these students are either in special schools or schools who have special classes for people with intellectual disability. And a lot of them are kind of working on level 1s and level 2. So they're not coming with a leaving cert for the most part. Some of them may have done an applied leaving cert. But for the most part, they're coming maybe with a level 2, maybe a level 3 qualification. So we think of starting them in first year with a level 3, and then for those that are able, that we would support them to move through level 4 and level 5. So the people who stay with us for the full 2-year programme, that they would qualify with a level 5 at the end of it. Very much aligned with TU Dublin's vision, our strategic intent, our university education model, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So where we're at the moment is that we've identified these kind of main themes. So we have STEAM there, which is looking at science, technology, arts, those kinds of areas that we need to have those included. Life skills, so things around kind of healthy living, exercise, healthy eating, and very practical things like cooking and going to the shop and managing your budgets and all of those kind of things. Personal development is the piece that really looks at who am I and where am I going, and how am I going to get there, and what kind of a job do I want, if I want a job, or do I want further education, those kinds of things. Preparation for work is very much learning all about work and what it means to have a job, and what it means to get paid, all the different types of jobs that you can do out there. And we would include some work experience, so that they would hope that there'd be some work experience on campus for when they're in first year of the programme. So the way we do it in Blanchardstown is that we would have students from the programme working in the canteen, working with caretakers, working in the gym, the library, those kinds of areas on campus. And then that in second year of the programme, we would look to what is this student particularly interested in and try and find them a work placement for 1 day a week out in the community. For a lot of our students who've been coming through the programme in Blanchardstown, nearly all of those work placements out in the community have turned into some kind of employment for them. So that's really positive. And the last piece there is around advocacy and citizenship. So we think people need skills in learning about their rights and learning how to kind of speak up for their rights and recognise what those rights are and how do I kind of make sure that those rights are being respected. So they're kind of the themes that we're looking at for the programme. Really important to us is that we have inclusivity. So we don't want this programme to be an add-on. We want it to be very much integrated into college. Inclusivity that needs to happen within the classroom and also outside of the classroom on campus. And if you ask anyone from Blanchardstown, they'll tell you that these guys are very much part of our fabric, I suppose, in the Blanchardstown campus. So 2-year programme, like we've said, we also wanted to have a 2-year follow-on, so supported employment, those kinds of things, that people won't be just left off after their 2 years, that we will follow up with them for a 2-year period after that. It's going to need resources. We're looking at kind of having support staff employed and that they would be, supporting those students through their programme. Peer support is something we hope to look at so that we would recruit other students as volunteers who can support their peers who are on the programme. And staff training, obviously, that we'd be hoping that anyone who's getting involved in this programme with us, that we will, support them and the proper training will be provided. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, I'll try.
You can,
Okay. Deirdre mentioned that we hope that the programme, or we're designing the programme so that it's aligned with TU Dublin's vision and the university education model. So I think that can be summed up by creating a better world together, which is a very good aspiration of the strategic intent 2030. And I think it's very praiseworthy, and some of the stuff in that document is really something positive and something very good to aspire to. But some of the quotes from that really show how the programme can align very well to the strategic intent and to the university education model. So of course the strategic intent is based on the 3 pillars of people, planet and partnership. I think we're probably all familiar with those words now, but particularly onto the people pillar of the strategic intent, and this programme I think will have very good alignment with that. And of course that the whole creating a better world together is underpinned by the UN SDG goal, quality education for all, and I think that word all is very important in there, that it's inclusive for everybody and not just for particular types of people. So some of the quotes from, I won't read all of them out because of the time, but some of the ones that are very important there I think will be things like pathways for all, lifelong learning, a place that underpins equality, diversity and inclusion. We want to be the most accessible university in Ireland with the most diverse learners. And then under the education model, especially the guiding principle number 10, the principle of access and equal opportunity, I think they're all going to be very important parts of this programme. And I think the programme itself will help the university to attain its goals or its objectives. We mentioned that over the last few months and years, we've been doing a lot of background research into what the programme should look like. So we've been consulting with a lot of stakeholders. Most important stakeholders, of course, would be potential students or people with intellectual disability, what they would like to see in a university programme for people with intellectual disability. And so we've spoken to people there. We're going to be speaking to graduates of the Blanchardstown programme shortly as well. We've spoken to enterprise because we'd like to have not just placements, but also an internship programme as part of the programme, so that students can then go on to employment and find meaningful employment that will help them gain confidence and gain the ability to live independently as well with their own finance resources and so on. So we've spoken to enterprise to see what they'd like to see in the programme, and they're very positive as well about recruiting students from and recruiting graduates from the programme as well. We've spoken to educational psychologists about this and what they think should be in the programme and how it should look like. We've talked to disability service providers, we've talked to parents and schools and about what they think the ability of the students will be and what their typical level will be. Deirdre talked about most students maybe having maybe a level 3 when they finish school, and what level would be appropriate to start them at in a university program. We've talked to the QA, we've talked to library, we've talked to occupational therapists, we've talked to a whole host of people. We've talked to we've had at least 50 meetings with different types of people and different types of stakeholders to make sure that the program is designed as good as it can be and what it's appropriate for the students that we hope to recruit. So lastly, this is the last slide. The next steps, there's a lot of work done. We've done the foundational work. We're in the process of designing the program. It's at an advanced stage now. We've identified the models or the modules rather, and the themes of those modules. But we still have a lot of work to do. So we still need a lot more support from other lecturers and from other staff in the college, particularly at management level. And we'd like to do a presentation to the university executive team to kind of make them more familiar with what we're trying to achieve with this program and how it aligns with the university's aims and objectives. And we want to validate the program as well, so we're in the process of developing the program proposal form, and that has to go through academic council and so on just yet on the university's program board. But that's a kind of difficulty because at the moment the faculty boards are just in the middle of being established at the moment, so trying to kind of work that paperwork through a structure that's changing, the organisation design is changing, as you know, or has changed, and it's trying to get the paperwork through that is a bit difficult. But ongoing promotion of the program as well to internal and external stakeholders will be one of our next steps as well. And of course, the path for application to try and secure funding to make the program sustainable in the future. So that's it. Thank you very much.
It's great to see change, even if sometimes it comes slow. But yeah, best of luck. Yeah, thank you. We have now. We are running a bit late, but what we can do is shorten the coffee break from an hour to 20 minutes. There's coffee there, so if at any time you want to take a cup of coffee, it will be good. And so this is questions and answers. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. And if you haven't been introduced, like I have been introducing to the speakers, please introduce yourselves. Yes, your name and So.
Hi, sir. My name is Melody. I'm from Tala, TW. Sorry. My question is for Keith. I wanted to ask about the thinking about assessments for students. If you look at TW, most of our courses are really practical, and yet students are still being given more or less writing CAs constantly. Is there a plan to review how students are assessed? I'm asking both as a librarian, as a parent with children that have dyslexia, ADHD, and the struggle I see, because most of the support is coming from me and not from the university. You mentioned something about comprehension. My daughter has been trying to write a proposal for her research, and she's been struggling a lot, and I've been struggling as well now to support her because I'm not qualified, except I'm a parent, and I'm seeing how she's struggling. Have you she's doing baking art, pastry art management. I don't think there's any need for her to write a thesis, right? In my opinion, she could design something and bake it and present it, and that's it. And maybe write the steps of what she did, instead of writing an academic paper with literature review of 20 items, which she's reading, but she can't comprehend. And I have to comprehend it, but it's not my, and there's a lot of questions about academic whatever there, but I can't see my child struggling and not do anything. So yeah, sorry, I'm going on. Is there any?
It's probably more able to support it than anybody else because you're living the experience as well. There is no plan. The plan is I keep banging the drum. I keep standing there, everyone I meet talking about it. And I'm at the moment working on trying to change the font style to get rid of Times New Roman and introduce Banana. So, as you'll know, trying to make any change or any thing in the university environment is very hard. The change, I think, has to come from us, the lecturing staff, the teaching staff, the academic staff, the web staff, whatever. Make small change in the room. And then the students have to accept the change. I teach research proposals. I teach the introduction to research methods. I have 40 odd students in the room. I offer them, instead of writing maybe 1,500 word blah 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 research proposal, try something different. Video yourself what you're going to do. Give them lots of different options. And the room is full of diversity and no one took it up. Because the belief is that we have to produce a research proposal. I was warned when we head of the department in Henry's Examiner, stop banging the drum. I didn't want to produce a thesis. What person, I'm trying to write for a neurodiversity. What neurodiverse person is going to read my 300 page document, 80,000 books, literature reviews, took me 6 months and built 400 pence to write it. You know, because nobody's going to read it. But I was told it's a level 10, this is what you have to produce, tick the boxes, move on and make a change. So the change is really hard to make. But I think we make small changes in our own environment. We condense that into that change. Maybe be the rebel within. You have the module, you have the description, close the door.
Thank you.
Alicia? I'm Alicia Lubek. I work with Sarah in Winca. I guess I have a comment for Keith and then a question for the others. Comment for Keith is about the discourse, and I wonder if you ever looked at that, because I come from a generation where I went to school in the 80s and nobody heard about dyslexia. And like my own father was dyslexic, never diagnosed. And then in the 90s, everybody had that piece of paper that they're dyslexic because they didn't want to do the, you know, be caught with the bad spelling or something. And I think that produced that kind of vision of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it really needs to be thought that it's real. But just the fact that there was some bad apples who just wanted to escape from the responsibility of, you know, typing, that doesn't mean that it's not real. And I think that's quite important.
But this is where the argument of does it really exist?
Well, it does.
And the fact that we need this. Oh yeah, no. I know it exists. I'm just saying that I have to bring this in because there is a school of thought that says it doesn't exist. There are people just trying to take an easy route, get away with it.
But I think, you know, you need to kind of take the devil's advocate approach as well and acknowledge that there was the period of time when there was a lot of people trying to do kind of get away. And then, you know, then you can
But even in today's world.
Is it still the,
yes,
yeah, because I was whispering this.
So like I've got 4 daughters. I'd say one is undiagnosed, she's done well, doesn't want to go ahead, and then the other one has diagnosed. But again, the fight for the diagnosis stage was horrendous because they don't have the funding, don't have the resources. And the train of thought is that's just someone else. You know, I went to a meeting and, you know, I'm not saying anything about the school or anything like that, they only can work within their budget, but I went to a meeting and they're telling me about dyslexia, about reading and spelling, and my daughter's really good because we encourage them, they've read since they're children, they read books all the time. So because she can read really well, so I just have to interrupt the conversation and say, well, you know, I'll just say this much, and then they took it on board. They're still looking at the ABC, they're not looking at the spectrum and all of the characteristics.
That's kind of
just looking at the same.
Makes it, and I don't want to take over, but it's more for about the resources and funding. The reason why I was thinking about when you were speaking, but then everybody else from a perspective of the lecturer, because I'm a researcher now, but for years I've been doing a lot of adjunct teaching, and you know, there's this whole shift to hourly paid precarious adjunct teachers. I was driven demented, seriously, being paid zero money, literally, and being told that everything has to be online because people are neurodiverse, the second language, all that, and I recognized that. But I was trying to struggle between 3 jobs myself, like, you know, with the housing crisis, whatever, like, you know, the last thing I had time for is to have every slide in every font, and like, and I think there is a really, really big issue of funding and resources that, you know, it should be there and it should be recognized for a lot of reasons, for a lot of, you know, disability spectrums, and but also I'm thinking a lot of foreign students who come here with English as a second language, like, you know, it is very difficult in the beginning to get an understanding of the lecture without the science in front of it. And all of that, I think that, you know, banging the door and banging the drum should be louder in terms of the funding and the resources, because it's a lot of a lot of issues that need to be tackled from that perspective, that we need resources and teachers who are properly paid, who have time to do that.
And it's the same as the assessment, the accessibility. It all needs to be funded and resourced. What it just requires is for people to take us, give us some training, give us some guidance, give us some resources. And like as a lecturer, you know, I mean, I don't speak for Sylvia, but I know the work she puts in outside of her 16-hour contract working on this program. That's what we do well. The work I put in myself. We do loads of work. That's why I say we're speaking to the converters.
But we also
We're
need to
banging on the wrong
incorporate, I
doors,
think-
but we need to keep banging on the doors because, you know, we know the rules of the game. We have to keep playing the
I
game
mean,
to make the
just
change.
to add, I mean, I suppose really what we're trying to do is push away from that charitable model where, you know, the you know, as Kathleen Lynch talks about the carelessness of higher ed, you know, that the care shouldn't come from your additional hours.
Unpaid.
Yes.
Unpaid work there for people
Yes.
with.
So I mean, it should, you know, what Keith is trying to do, to paraphrase from talking to you before, is to design with intent, so that this is the aim and this is the gig, and we know what happens. It's not just disenfranchisement; it's mental health and beyond, and that's the students, and you're alluding to
That's my problem.
yeah.
Any other questions? Just a brief comment. I'm Maria Armstrong from TU Dublin Blanchardstown campus. I was just gutted to hear that there's no access to the Susie grant. Like, just what does that speaks volumes as to the priority?
Because it's not a recognised TU Dublin programme. It's not a recognised programme from HEA.
So the other ones on the, you know, the other ones that you had up there, are they recognised, or is it just because it's getting validated?
Yeah, they're not at the moment.
Right.
So
So none of
and they're
those
not
ones-
funded centrally, and yeah, no, it's really, really ad hoc at the moment.
They're not funded with a medical card or anything. And I went to the National Mental Network after my accident.
Yeah.
College for students.
Yeah.
In the level 3.
Yeah,
I was funded with a medical card.
yeah. No, and if they were in LN, they would be funded,
Yeah.
but because our program, we kind of, these programs, because they're not they're not, you know, officially recognised programs, they're kind of falling between. Yeah.
Maybe you wanted to add something. Yeah?
No, I wanted to ask a question. It's a very good question, I think. How do the other students feel, you know, in Blanchardstown when they're learning in the same classroom with students with intellectual disability?
Really positive. So I've written a paper on this that's available on Arrow. Really, it's really good for the students who are on the program. It's amazing for our other students.
I would think so, yeah.
7 and 8 students, yeah. So a lot of, I teach on social care in a module called Creative Studies, and that would be one of those mixed modules. And so one of the things I used to ask students to do is tell me about your most significant learning event from the module, and nearly everybody would say, these guys in the class. You know? So it just makes them realise that actually people with intellectual disabilities are not that different to the rest of us. You know, we're all struggling with the same stuff. We all enjoy the same stuff. And yeah, they make friends with them. You see them then over in the canteen having lunch together, or organising a night out together, and that kind of thing. You know, so yeah, just it's seamless. People think that it's this big thing, but actually it works really, really well.
I think it would solve some of the social issues that, you know, people with any disability face when they're out there and people are staring or, you know, calling them names or whatever, that if they're just in society in general, then people are used to having them.
And actually, one of the things, because I did a focus group with social care students to say what difference does this make, and one of the things that people kind of had this shift in attitude, so people would start in September thinking, God love them, and isn't it awful, and kind of pitying them. And by the time they've worked with them for a semester, they're like, guys. And they're saying, if I ever heard anybody feeling sorry for somebody with an intellectual disability, I'd say, well, yeah, you know, that's not what it's about.
We need to not underestimate.
Yes.
I think it's great. Kind of conversation. Sorry, Elaine.
Yeah, I was just going to say what I think Deirdre was saying there is one of the greatest arguments for inclusion in education. It's when students actually get to work with other disabled students, they actually learn a lot more and they develop more compassion.
And not even compassion, maybe just as you said, it's not about it. I mean, it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's just part of the normal diversity.
It's part of a scale rather than a binary understanding of what's normal, what's not normal. You shouldn't operate in the binary scale. But it's an experience that gets you to understand.
Our university should reflect society, and at the moment our university doesn't reflect the makeup of society, and I think part of the aim of this program would be to make sure that it does.
Ellen, you wanted to say something. It's very challenging in the hybrid environment. Ellen wanted to say something, but Ellen, do you?
No, I agree. Like, that's actually
Okay.
something that I was trying to cover in my talk, that our degrees and our universities should reflect society a lot more.
And just one thing you were saying, Elaine, really resonates with me. You know how you were saying, say, to be a librarian, you need a master's. I just think we're gone a bit crazy. You don't just do a degree nowadays, you do a master's. Like, everyone is doing a master's. And I think it's ridiculous anyway, personally. Don't let the boss hear me say that. But, I agree. And it goes to what Melody was saying as well, like, about the level of the assessments should match what you're doing. That more thought needs to be put into the assessments, and it should be at an appropriate level and relevant. Everything should be relevant, and I think we are over-assessing as well. And these are all barriers to people who don't fit into the box. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I think it's impacting mental health because there's so much pressure on young people that do not have a degree. I've kind of always said that, I'm originally from Poland, and when I left in the early 2000s, you had to have 2 masters to be a cleaner. So there was this devaluation because everybody had to have a master's, and then you ended up it's like, doesn't matter what you do, you have to have a master's to even go for a job interview for any. And there is the danger that you need to address the diversity of occupations and the different assessment. Not everybody has to write 10,000 word thesis.
It's already happened here. I get an electrician.
True. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
And I have a friend, actually, she's like the same age as me, and she never finished a degree, so she can't get a job now, and she's so brilliant, it's crazy. Yeah. It's anyway.
Okay, this kind of conversations before, it's just amazing, when in the past 2 years that we have done this showcase online, this kind of spontaneous discussion and conversation, which is great, is something that you need, in a purely online environment. So there is coffee there are croissants.